Just knowing the GRE, knowing what's on the GRE, a little bit about the GRE. I'm going to go real briefly over some of the different question types that you'll find on the GRE, because I think people tend to expect it to be just like the SAT. And there are different question types. There are things that you'll probably never have seen before. When the GRE changed in 2011, it was really amusing to see, not amusing in a good way, but people would come to the practice test and just completely get every single question wrong on a section because there are question types that you've just never seen before, and people would just get very flustered. So I'm going to go over a little bit of that so that that doesn't happen to you. And then I'll talk a little bit about the importance of prepping, go over some of the statistics for the GRE, like the price. I realized that I was wrong. I looked in my notes and it is $160, not $170. Not a big difference, but I did want to clarify that. And then I'll talk a little bit about Kaplan GRE, what our program entails, what our options are for you, and then we'll have a little Q&A period. So I think I'm supposed to be a half an hour, so I hope I finish all that in a half an hour. It'll be a mouthful. But knowing the GRE, so the GRE you'll have an analytical writing section, you'll have 2 timed sections for 30 minutes apiece, 30 minutes per task. You'll have 1 analyze an issue task and 1 analyze an argument task. So there'll be slightly different expectations in terms of what you're supposed to be writing about. Those are scored on a scale of 0 to 6. So that does not go into your total score, but kind of is separate. Then you'll have 2 verbal reasoning sections and 2 quantitative reasoning sections. Each one will have approximately 20 questions. For the verbal reasoning, you'll have 30 minutes per section, and for the quantitative reasoning, you'll have 35 minutes per section. So from how this sounds, it does sound like a lot like the SAT. You're going, okay, this sounds like a similar format to the SAT. It will be on the computer. That's going to be the first big difference. And I like to kind of think of the GRE as kind of the accelerated SAT. It has a lot of the same format, it has a lot of the same feel, but now we're going beyond the students that just want to go to college, because I felt like in high school everyone wanted to go to college. Now we're going to that small select group of people who have done well in college and they want to continue that education. So you also have to remember that your competition is going to be along the same lines of you guys. It's going to be other people who have also done well in college. And so it is much more competitive in that sense as well. I say that because your GRE is scored. It's scored from a 130 to a 170, so you do get a number score, but you also get a percentile score, meaning that you're going to see whatever your score is for each section. So if you get a 150 in each section, you're going to be in the 50th percentile, meaning half the people who took the test did better than you, and half the people did worse. Give you an idea of some percentiles. 70th percentile is a 155 in each section. So you can see you're going from a 150 to a 155. That doesn't seem like that many more questions, right? It's only 5 more points. And you're jumping over 20% of test takers. And then 90th percentile is for verbal a 162 and for quantitative a 164. And this kind of goes into why is studying and why is preparing for the GRE so important. Because here you're seeing you're going from 50th percentile as a 150, 162, 164, that's 12 points on this scale, brings you to the 90th percentile. 5 points brings you to the 70th percentile. If you're thinking about the number of people that take this test, to make the math easy, if we have 100,000 people take this test, which we do have more than 100,000 people that take the GRE every year. But if you have just 100,000 people, and you bring your score up from a 150 to a 155, it's a few questions in each section. Literally just 2 or 3 questions in each section. You're jumping over 20,000 of your competitors. And in terms of getting in terms of getting scholarship, in terms of getting money, it's incredibly important. So every amount of time spent studying and focusing on the issues that's going to help you get just 1 or 2 more questions right in each section is incredibly important. Now, how exactly is it scored? The GRE is interesting in that it's a multi-stage test. And what that means is you're going to have a section, so you'll have verbal section 1, you'll have 20 questions, and then within that section you're going to have a variety of different question levels. So you have some easy, some medium, some more difficult question levels. And then depending on how you do in that section, the test is going to adapt. Who here has taken a test on the computer? Any type of test on the computer? Okay. Who here has taken an adaptive test on the computer? This poses many different things. So you're going to have the same amount of time in this section as you will in this section. Except that if you do well in this section, which is what you want to do, your questions are going to get more difficult, and you're going to be put into the most difficult level for the next section. So now you're going to be facing the most difficult GRE questions. You're going to still have 20 of them. You're still going to have 30 minutes. But the questions are going to be harder. So it's really working on how to answer those most difficult questions as quickly as possible. Again, if you do a medium level, you'll be put into a medium level next section, and that gives you a middle potential scoring range. And then if you do poorly in this first section, you'll be put into an easier section, and that will put you in the lowest potential scoring range. So how you do in that first section is going to affect your second section, and that's going to affect your scoring range. And ultimately, how you do in that second section is going to affect your total score. Going back to this scale, you'll get a 130 to 170 score for both the quantitative and the verbal. So in that way, again, similar to the SAT where you got a 200 to 800 for each section. Unlike the SAT, it's very rare for you to really describe it, okay, well I got a 300 on the GRE. Usually keep those numbers separate, particularly because different programs will have different requirements for each thing. So instead of looking for like a 310, they might be looking for a 160 on the quantitative and a 150 on the verbal, depending on exactly what they're looking for, depending on, as was mentioned earlier, what the theory of that program is, what's important to that program. They might have different requirements for that. You'll see the same thing happen again with the quantitative section, where you'll have a section of the quantitative. Depending on how you do here, it'll put you into a second section of the quantitative. One thing that's important to understand, especially if you are strong in maybe quantitative and not verbal, is that doing poorly on the verbal section is not going to affect your second section of quantitative. It's just your first section of quantitative will affect your second section of quantitative. The other thing that I want to point out is the different question types that we have here, and so I'm going to go first to the verbal section. We have text completion, sentence equivalence, and reading comprehension. And you can see we have 6 text completion, 4 sentence equivalence, 10 reading comprehension. This is one of the things that I think is so helpful about using a test prep company, is that we know the test inside and out. So we know that 50% of your verbal section, your verbal test, is going to be reading comprehension, which means that 50% of your studying, or at least for the verbal section, should be reading comprehension. Because if you're struggling with sentence equivalence, you can study days upon days upon days for sentence equivalence, but at the end of the day, it's 20% of your verbal section. So no matter how much you study and how good you get at sentence equivalence, it's still only 20%. You're still only going to maximum get 8 questions out of that. So having that type of knowledge, knowing how the test is built, is really going to help you score better. Because it's ultimately about getting your max potential score. And I'll go into a little bit about exactly what each of these question types are. Same thing you see with the quantitative section. Your quantitative comparison and your problem solving, much higher than your data interpretation. If data interpretation is something that's really you're struggling with, you do have that comfort of knowing there's only 6 questions on the test that are like that. That being said, something like quantitative comparisons, and I'll show you that later, they have the exact same answer for literally A, B, C, D is the exact same thing for every single question. And so it's not really about being able to do the math, but being able to understand what's being put in front of you. At the end of the day, this is a critical thinking test, so it's not necessarily, do you remember algebra enough to do this, but can you use your critical thinking skills to get to the correct answer? And you'll see more of that in the next few slides as well. Know the GRE admissions factors. Again, this is going into the timeline that was just discussed, but you'll have a rolling admissions, a lot of programs that will start usually around now, September, October period, and roll in through April. We give a lot of the same advice. If it is rolling admissions, it's going to be rolling based on the number of seats in that program, so get your things in early. A lot of graduate school programs, it's definitely possible to get money, to get help financially. But again, that's going to go as the rolling admissions go, and when the money runs out, the money runs out. So again, get your applications in early to get your GRE score early. Some basic reading comprehension information. About half of the verbal reasoning questions on the GRE will be based on passages. The majority of passages are one paragraph in length, and 1 to 6 questions per passage. So this is a sample reading comprehension question. Short paragraph, then you'll have a number of questions to follow it. Notice here that the ovals, you'll see in the next question that I go to. This is a reading comprehension with multiple selection. Consider each of the choices separately and select all that apply. Note that this would be just one question of your 20. So this could be question number 16. And question number 16 is looking for all of the correct choices. And so in that case, if you answer 1 and 2 of them should have been answered, that question is wrong. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. There is no partial credit with the GRE. One easy thing to look for, I just mentioned the ovals in the last one, squares here. Squares mean that you have the option of answering more than one. So that's an automatic visual clue that, okay, I'm looking for all of the possible answers. If you see the ovals, you know you're looking for just one singular answer.
How common is it, 2 or even 3? Is that, you can't automatically just assume that it's...
You can't assume that it's going
it's 2
to be,
at least,
right,
2 or 3.
No, you can't assume that I don't actually know statistics on if they offer it. It's more common to. That's a great question. I don't know if we even know that, or if there's any way to look into that. But I can definitely ask some people that create our questions and things like that.
So it's just a tip off more so than to say.
Yeah, it's a visual clue that can help you save time rather than if you know that this box is going to say that the same thing as that squares, then as soon as you look at that, it's one less thing you have to read, and it's just moves your test a little bit faster. Text completion. It's kind of the cousin of the old sentence completion. It's composed of 1 to 5 sentences and can have 1, 2, or 3 blanks. Each blank functions independently, and no credit, again, is given to partially correct answers. So what does that look like? So here's one with 1 blank. You've got your 5 answers here. If you have 1 blank, you will always have 5 answers. If you have, I'm not sure if I've got an example of 2 blanks. Hold on. Yep. If you have more than 1 blank, so here we've got 3 blanks, you will have 3 answers for each one. Again, so this kind of is going into learning your vocabulary. What the GRE decided when they revised the test is that they wanted to know more than just whether or not you know what the word means, but whether or not you can understand how it affects the meaning of a sentence, how it affects the meaning of a paragraph. The most challenging thing here is you can get this blank 1 correct and blank 2 correct, but if you get blank 3 incorrect, the whole question is wrong. And so this counts as 1 individual question. Okay. Sentence equivalence. This is the big one that I always like to discuss and cover because text completion, while that's the 3 blanks and that's kind of taking things to the next level, that's something that at some point in time we've all done before. Sentence equivalence is really something that we've never seen before. I really think it's brilliant and it can be a lot of fun in the long run. But it's the cousin of the sentence completion question type that you probably did on the SAT. The big difference here is you'll have 6 choices, and exactly 2 mean nearly the same thing and lead to a complete coherent sentence. Now, that doesn't mean we're looking for synonyms here. It means that we're looking for the two words that are going to make the sentence have the exact same meaning. So again, it's not looking at necessarily your vocabulary skills, but whether or not you can think critically and determine how that word and how putting those two words into the sentence is going to change the meaning of the sentence. And so you're looking for the two words that make the sentence mean the same thing. This is definitely something that you're going to want to take a look at because again, it's something that you've probably never done before, and it's a whole new task in terms of what you're looking at. Quantitative reasoning, 4 question types. You have your quantitative comparison, you have your multiple choice select one answer, multiple choice select one or more answers, and then your numeric entry. We'll start with quantitative comparison. So this is the one where I said the example is the same, or the answers are the same for every single question. Every single question, you're going to be given a problem. You're going to get quantity A is something, quantity B is something, and then your answers are going to be A is greater, B is greater, they're equal, or it cannot be determined from the information given. With the quantitative comparison questions, they're not looking for an answer. You do not have to sit here and figure out this whole question and figure out exactly what A is to figure out if it's 12. And many times they're going to be giving you clues so that you know, okay, 12 might be 12.6 or whatever it is. They're not necessarily looking for an exact answer. They're just looking, can you determine what this answer is? And then you have to go through and answer this. I showed you earlier there'll be, I think it was 8 to 9 questions on each section that are just like this, and every single one will have these exact same answers. So you'll be able to know those answers going in. You don't have to read them. They're not going to change up the order and try and trick you. It's literally just trying to get you to think critically and determine whether or not you can answer them. Here is the multiple choice select one answer. Again, we've got the ovals, and if we move to the select multiple answers, you'll see the squares again. Again, just context clues. And same similar type of question, just this one's a little more open-ended with indicate all such numbers. Finally, you have the, I thought I had an example of it, I don't. The numeric entry, last one here on the list. Just like in the SAT with, you had those 3 at the bottom where it was, you had to fill in the bubbles, you had to find the actual answer and then write in 26 or whatever it is, 0.7. You have a few, I think it's 4, as I showed you before at the beginning. But you have a few numeric entry questions. As it's on the computer, you do just type it right in. Things for the quantitative section of the GRE, you do have a calculator. It is a fairly basic calculator. It's about the same calculator that's on your phone. So it's nothing real in-depth. But you do have that calculator. Now the thing there to remember is, again, your time. And again, remember that for half of the problems, you're not even looking for an exact answer. So don't get distracted by your calculator. We definitely recommend that when you're practicing, you do want to practice taking practice tests on the computer and using that interface where it's got a calculator so that you don't get distracted by the fact that you have a calculator or that you start taking too much time using the calculator. The calculator is there to remove minor errors. They didn't want to see people make errors from doing basic addition and subtraction and multiplication on a paper. That's not what they're looking for. Again, they're looking for how you think critically. So use the calculator to your advantage, but don't get distracted by it. Some more important things about the GRE. What's really cool about the interface, you can see that because it adapts by section, you've got this back and forth motion right here, so that you can go and skip a question. You can come back to a question at the end. You also have this mark button up here. That's one of my absolute favorite features about the GRE, because for me, if I'm taking a paper or pencil test, I'm going to answer every single question, right? I'm going to at least try it. But if I'm not sure about it, I'm going to circle the number. That's how at least I take a paper pencil test, so that I know, okay, if I've got time, I'm going to come back to that. And that's exactly the same feature here, basically. You want to answer every single question. I know the SAT had that really strange, you get 1 point if you get it right, and if you get it wrong, you lose 1/4 of a point, and then if you don't answer, and I remember sitting there going, so what do I do? GRE is not like that. You get points for it being correct. If it's incorrect, it's nothing. You don't lose points, it's just 0. If you leave it blank, it's just 0. So you want to take a guess for every single question. But you do have the option to then mark it and go back and look later. Now the cool thing here is you also have this review section button at the top, and you're able to click review, and it shows you all the questions. So you'll have to list 20 questions, and it'll show you which questions you answered, which questions you have not answered yet, and which questions that you've marked. So it can say answered and marked, or not answered and marked. So you have that nice review thing. Again, a lot of really nice features in terms of navigating the GRE and getting around and getting used to that. This is an awesome thing, again, when talking about why I think using a prep company is important, because all of our resources are going to emulate that. And so the more time you have experience, getting experience with this material and just kind of getting used to that access, navigation, it's going to be easier to get around. Just as it's, I'm sure you use, whichever, if you use Chrome or use Internet Explorer, when you try and switch over, it's like, what am I doing? Because you're using something new. So just getting used to that interface is extremely important. And there are a lot of ways where this interface can definitely help you and help you get around and help you review everything that you need to. At the same time, it is timed, so if you're spending too much time playing with the interface, it can then become a detriment to your test. So you want to find that balance as well. Some other basic information about the GRE. You can take the GRE once every 60 days, which is important because that means you've got 2 months there where you can't retake it. So don't leave it to the last minute. Don't, you saw that timeline. Don't think, okay, I'll take it in October, and then I'll be finished and I'll get my results and I can apply in November. Because should you do not as well as you want to give yourself that time. You want to give yourself that window so that you can utilize that 60 days. Now, the other thing to remember is you can take it 5 times a year. Do not take it 5 times. It's part of the thing that I'm just supposed to say, but please don't. There's just no reason to take it 5 times. Now, one thing that was mentioned earlier is the schools can see all of your scores. That is true. If you submit all of your scores, the schools can see it. One of the tricky things, I'm sorry, am I getting too close again? One of the tricky / interesting things is that ETS, who does the GRE, so you might actually want to write that website down, ets.org. ETS is a for-profit company, which is something that most people don't, you don't think about when you're thinking about standardized testing, but ETS is a for-profit company. And so one thing they have just instated is this thing called Score Select, where now if you do take it multiple times, and let's say you take it 3 times, I'm of the same opinion as that was mentioned earlier. If it continues to go up, that's a good thing. Now if it goes up drastically, that could raise some flags too, but if it continues to, incremental improvements, that's probably not a bad thing, and I don't think any school looks at that negatively. But if you have a score and then you go up and then you go down, you do have the option now to score select, and you pay an extra fee and you choose which score you want to send. You can't pick and choose, so it can't be I want to pick my verbal from this day and my quantitative from this day. You pick the whole testing session, and you are able to send them. Other really important number to take note of is that your score is good for 5 years. That's just something to know and to consider. I don't know if anyone is considering going out and trying to get working experience. If you're thinking about taking some time, trying to find the funds to pay for graduate school, or whatever your thoughts might be, your score is good for 5 years, so that's an important number to remember. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you, though, regardless of how much time you want to take off or what you're thinking, and I'm fairly certain every other working adult is going to agree with me when I say this, take it while you're a student. Because once you get out of college, you stop taking tests, you stop studying, you stop thinking like a student, and and just the idea of going back to study for it becomes an even larger mountain to climb. You know, and then you have so many other things to worry about. So the fact that you can have it done, even if you take it right as you're finishing your senior year, and okay, I've got 5 years, I can go get some experience. Then when you go back, you don't have to worry about it. It's done. You've got it, and you've already taken it out as a student. So that's you're going to score better as a student. Statistically, we've tracked that, and you do score better. So why prep for the GRE? We've talked a little bit about that in terms of the competitive advantage. These are the old scores. So that's one thing I do like to mention. You'll see the test did change in 2011, so schools are slowly, very slowly putting up new averages. But I'm still constantly getting students saying, like, you said it scored from a 130 to a 170, and that would make the maximum like just over 300, and my school went to 700, and I'm only good at 700. So the reason is that the old test was scored from a 200 to 800 in each section. So if you see those numbers, that's why. It's very hard to compare these numbers to the new numbers. However, you can look up percentile charts for the old numbers and figure out what that means in terms of where you should be in the new percentiles. And you can look up those percentile charts as well. The one thing, the whole recommendation there, look up your schools, figure out what scores they want. If they've got the old scores, then you can address that. Hopefully, most schools should be moving to the new numbers now. But either way, you want to know what your goals are. One of the very first things we do in a course is set goals, because then you have you're actively trying to achieve a certain thing. It's not just I want my score to improve. I don't want it to just get better, but I want to get here. This is what my school wants. This is what I want to get, and so that makes you work for a specific goal. 66% of graduate school admissions officers say a strong GRE score will help a student receive merit-based scholarships, teaching assistance, or grants. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the most important factors, not only in your admissions, but it's definitely one of the most important factors in scholarships and getting some money. How important is an applicant's GRE score in securing merit-based scholarship, teaching assistance, or grants? So you can see it's somewhat important and or very important for the majority of admissions counselors. How to prep for the GRE. Here's where I'm going to talk a little bit about Kaplan, exactly what our course offers. We have the largest Kaplan question library with over 5,000 practice items and 7 proprietary full-length, fully adaptive practice tests. Regardless of how you prepare for the GRE, first of all, make sure you do prepare somehow. But regardless of how you do it, you want to make sure that you have full-length, fully adaptive practice tests. If you're not practicing with an adaptive practice test, your practice tests are going to have full range questions in each section. And so let's say you do practice really well, you do great in that first section, you're going to get to a second section that's more difficult than any other section you've ever seen. That's only going to stress you out more. It's going to make that testing experience seem worse than it actually is. And so you want to be prepared for that and be practicing with adaptive tests. We have over 180 hours of instruction and practice with 8 classroom sessions that are then paired with extensive out-of-class instructional resources and practice. Our Kaplan instructors, to become a Kaplan instructor, you have to score within a 90th percentile of the test. So you don't just have to be really great at whatever you're doing, or you don't have to just be a graduate student, but you have to have done really well on the test. After that, you have to be a really good teacher. So all of the Kaplan teachers, they submit with their resume their score, but then we literally do sessions where they have the camera and they have to teach for our HR people, and they can teach whatever, but it's really important to us that our instructors are really good at conveying whatever message they're trying to convey. I'm sure we've all had the teacher where you're just sitting there and you're going, that person is so smart. I have no idea what they just said. And in terms of raising your score, that's really not very helpful for you, because you really want to find someone that you're going to connect with, that's really going to connect with you, and that's really going to make you understand okay, wow, this is making sense to me. To make sure that